Good evening. It is shortly before midnight on August 14th, 2020. I have recently started a playlist on YouTube that is labeled Crouse for President. I've actually had an actual blog called Crouse for President since February of 2019. I started it as a sincere and legitimate campaign as an independent candidate for political office. I had contacted the Republican Party in Texas. I had also contacted the Democrat Party in Texas with a request around that time. But in May of 2019, I understood that there was a threat to assassinate another political candidate and or me personally, and I withdrew at that time. I made this public on my blog, or rather what would have been my campaign website, which is still active, or it's active now. I'll provide a link in this video. I had announced an intention to potentially run for public office in 2016 as well. That blog got stolen. It's completely gone. My Facebook is completely gone. My Facebook was taken offline immediately after attempting to contact a former vice presidential candidate. And so I don't know what happened officially to what was potentially my original campaign site and what was my Facebook that would have been a means by which I would have attempted to contact people to campaign. I decided to run or to announce that I was running for president in 2019 because at the time I was homeless and I had been trying for several years to get an official agency to respond to numerous reports I had filed concerning fraud specifically. I had also attempted to file legal filings through the state of Texas, the Texas Supreme Court, the District Court in the state of Texas, as well as the Supreme Court of the United States. One of my specific concerns, in addition to the fraud I had witnessed at a domestic violence shelter, or actually numerous domestic violence shelters that I had to go to outside of the city limits of Houston, as what I understood to be retaliation for attempting to report police inappropriate activity, was connected to an understanding that this pattern I had been seeing that I understood qualified as racketeering that was present in the cities that I was being trafficked between had also started to appear very profoundly in the federal budget process. And my concern was that there was actually a pattern of racketeering activity that was being promulgated through the federal budget process that was actually trafficking people in the United States, including political opposition. And that in various stages it could potentially target political opposition. And I believe it's actually connected to the assassination of members of political office, starting with former Mayor Ed Lee in San Francisco. Now, this hasn't made me very popular with anybody, but it is something that I have been witness to, and it's been something that has been threatened against me. And I now believe that there was massive, massive fraud that occurred during the 2008 election campaign, and that these election interferences and this election fraud has been going on constantly since then in one manner or another, to the point where it is currently impossible to conceive of participation in the electoral process by what are considered the conventional means without having to be very cognizant of massive election interference. I will also say I have been witness directly to interference in the last Honduran presidential election that I attempted to report. And I also was witness to election interference involving an attempt for Stormont in Northern Ireland to take a vote for its parliament as well as its executives after it had agreed to a vote of no confidence and decided to have another election. It was my understanding that their response to understanding that there was election interference at that time was to devolve the government, and they only had an executive for 2 years. I understood this to be a strategic position and actually an act of political resistance by a legitimate government, and I had a great deal of respect for it. In fact, I thought it was the kind of thing that competent people in the United States would also have seen as a sign of respect for the people of Northern Ireland. While there was consistently problems perhaps with understanding that sort of situation in the context that was going on at the time, the fact that they understood that there was a problem with the legitimacy of their functioning, especially concerning the Cash for Ash scandal, which was what compelled the original attempt at a vote of no confidence. It was, to me, the only thing I found in 2017 that gave me inspiration that there might be something close to character left in political representation or what is considered to be constitutional or democratic governments globally. And so I let you know I was witness to acts of interference in foreign elections. I was a witness to election interference in the parliamentary election for the Iraqi government in 2018. And so I know this occurs. I know it's happening right now in Belarus. And the situation in Belarus is very significant. But this is not something that should deter people. Currently, there seems to be a significant movement to discuss this concept of mail in voting and increasing mail in voting. I'm currently in Texas. My understanding is as recently as 2 days ago, there was an announcement discussing a mandatory 14-day self quarantine period for people that are traveling, including via airline, if they can get access to that, traveling in or out of the state. That's just one example of the fact that since March 16th of 2020, officially under a declaration by the governor of the state of Texas, that there has been an order for self-quarantining. There is massive encouragement for people to stay inside their houses as much as possible. In fact, there have been decisions that I am actually encouraged to see by ISDs and teachers associations in Texas to discuss what they're going to be doing for the upcoming year. I do support teachers and teachers associations in the state of Texas with being as forthright as necessary about what the full implications of their considerations are. In other words, I'm not just saying talk about it from a public health perspective, but from all of the perspectives concerning the welfare and safety of children and young adults, as well as teachers. And any sort of attempts at machinations or manipulations that would attempt to influence people to increase the potential harm that they're exposed to or the children are exposed to by being in person and on site. At the same time, I also know that I personally have been trafficked between 5 cities in the state of Texas alone in the last 3 years. That was after being trafficked through Chicago, and that was after being trafficked through San Francisco after leaving the country for a short period of time. I tried contacting San Francisco and I tried contacting Chicago, Illinois to get verification of the cancellation of my voter registrations there in 2017. Chicago and the state of Illinois refused to verify the cancellation of my voter registration. San Francisco, through the Attorney General's office, gave me a local contact. Again, I was unable to verify the cancellation of my voter registration in San Francisco. I know I currently have at least 3, if not 4, potentially open voter registrations here in the state of Texas. As a matter of fact, during the 2018 campaign, while I was on the streets, one of the few election issues I discussed with myself or with others who I was able to talk to when I was the concept of what does it mean to vote if you're homeless? If you're homeless, you may be given an option to receive mail at a business address that allows you to have some sort of respite for your mail access during the day. But what happens if you're forced to leave that city and go to another city between elections? I potentially have right now, I am potentially on the voter rolls in 5 cities in 3 states. They refused to assist me in confirming cancellation of voter registration. I think this is a big issue. How does one confirm cancellation of voter registration? How many voter rolls are or campaign list are being distributed to people engaged in election or campaign activity that include people that are no longer in the district, but may or may not have been factored into some sort of algorithm or program trying to anticipate or influence voter decisions based on trend patterns that may reflect consumer habits that they engage during the time frame they did live in that district. In fact, I understand this is a big part of electioneering these days, is getting access to people's data based on their demographics, including their addresses and places of residency, and then extrapolating it based on a variety of other demographic information in order to target a specific issue. But what if you're homeless? What if you are should you be disenfranchised? I don't believe that's the case. But at the same time, how would you vote? This is just one example of how we've had at least several years of allegations of some sort of election interference or some sort of potential voter fraud, and the actual substantive issues of what that entails have not been addressed by any candidate. And so I'm saying right now that I believe this could potentially represent a good opportunity in this country for third party candidates to step up. Unfortunately, because neither the Democrats nor the Republicans have taken initiative of actually being honest and direct about what's really going on now. I believe as part of some long term party aligned hedging strategy, then we have a serious problem with credibility in terms of addressing facts from a two party system. Not only that, but the processes by which a third party candidate would be able to acquire petitions with signatures, get them verified, be able to meet the requirements for being an independent or third party candidate have been impossible. If you did not already have leverage or make a buy in into one of the major parties, then there was not legally the capacity for you to be able to do what you needed to do to make those standards. So if they're allowed right now to talk about mail in voting as somehow being legitimate, then they also have to call to question the entirety of what's considered to be a legitimate electoral process. I will do my part the best I can. Just so you know, I will make official. If you are engaged in criminal activity, you deserve to have your sovereign immunity waived and you deserve to be prosecuted. And if you were complicit with criminal activity that is a capital offense, then that needs to be considered accordingly. But it is not acceptable to run an election campaign based upon being able to leverage your access to acts of violence against opposition candidates, including in intentional use of directed energy weapons, sabotaging their campaign through threats of violence to their family or their constituents, or attempting an act of political assassination. I think that those are very basic standards that anybody engaged in electoral politics should be able to accept without question.